you're at a family's funeral for their child, their infant, and the questions you ask are you going to have more kids? At the funeral, they lost a baby at 37 weeks pregnancy. He was stillborn. And he came in to HR to ask for his bereavement leave. And they said, well, the policy says when you lose a living relative and your child never lived, so you don't get bereavement.
Wow.
So those are the kind of things that the families I'm serving encounter on a regular basis. And I just got fed up.
Welcome to In Good Company.
Today's guest is Michelle Cramer, founder and executive director of On Angel's Wings, a nonprofit company that provides free therapeutic photography and long-term grief support to families facing a terminal diagnosis for their child or experiencing infant loss. She began serving bereavement families in 2008 and found the organization in 2013 to create structured, sustainable support during unimaginable loss. Michelle is also the author of Unshattered Grief and the founder of the Compassionate Workplace Initiative, helping leaders respond to grief with clarity and compassion. Michelle, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Are you comfortable?
I'm great.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I'm
Kind
good.
of like sitting like this.
Oh, no, see, I have really good posture.
Okay. That
works.
All right.
That's a
great.
whole
You need a
other
pillow.
That looks
story,
great.
You have a pillow
though.
behind your back.
I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. That's not why I'm here, so I'll go to that. But it's intentional because of joint issues, actually. So
Fair enough.
Okay. Yes. Well, if you get uncomfortable and need a break or whatever, just please let us know.
Thank you.
We're happy to jump in.
Not used to somebody setting up straight. That's awesome.
I'm feeling like I need better posture now. Okay. Let me jump in. Let me just right off the bat, I think a lot of people have different concepts of what grief is.
Yeah.
What is your definition of grief?
So a lot of times people associate grief with someone's death. And conceptually, grief is everything that embodies a loss of some kind. So a lot of people don't consider their divorce to be grief. Moving, getting married even has grief associated with it. I mean, I did not live with a boy before, and now I have to give up my independence and live with a boy. What is this? So grief is associated with a lot of things, and we start experiencing it very young. When our hamster dies, when our parents get divorced, when we move away from our friends, it starts at a very, very young age. As an organization and me personally, we look at grief as all-encompassing, that everybody has experienced it in some way. And a lot of people, because of societal norms, don't associate the things that they've experienced with grief. In fact, when you look at like counselors, it's really hard to find a grief specialist who's a counselor. There are trauma counselors, but it's really hard to find a grief specialist. And what I think our society fails at is associating trauma and grief, because anybody who's experienced trauma has grief associated with that trauma. Grief doesn't necessarily mean that there's trauma, but trauma means there's grief. So it's all very cyclical. And I think we kind of fail at addressing that correctly. And we're just diving right in, aren't we?
We are. That's how we like to do it.
Into the
Just
heavy
get
right
in.
off the bat.
Thinking about grief in my own life, I experienced it differently. When I was little, I was pretty close to one of my aunts, and we got just a phone call that she had passed away, and she lived far away, so I didn't get to see her a lot. But it took me forever to realize that she actually was gone. I mean, I was pretty young, but still, like, I would still ask about her, and they're like, no, Angie's been gone for a couple of years.
We handle grief with kids differently. I'm a huge advocate for being honest with children and not using colorful language to try and explain, oh, well, they're sleeping, but they're never going to wake up. That's so confusing to a child.
Yeah.
Like, kind of, when they experience, we're all going to experience death in our lives.
Yeah.
We're all going to experience grief. So when we approach that with a child at a young age in the correct way, we start giving them coping mechanisms a lot earlier, and they're not, in their 30s going, how do I deal with this again?
Yeah.
So that's, that just immediately I thought, wow, that's.
I know for me, nobody ever really talked about grieving for someone, and that, it's just it was never explained. I don't know if did you guys ever have anybody talk to you about grief, or did it happened and you just kind of everybody knew?
I mean, we had like a family friend who went horseback riding. She was with church with us, very heavily involved in the church. She helped out with youth a lot. They went horseback riding, and she got bucked off a horse and died. And I don't know, I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And
that clearly impacted you because you still remember that.
Yeah. Her laugh was super contagious. I mean, my parents were up front and they were like, hey, she's no longer with us. She has passed away. And I mean, it threw shockwaves through all of our lives because we were like, she's like a foundation part of like church and everything else that we knew. And we were like, this is weird, like, and it wasn't even my own family. Like, this is what someone else's family, but it still impacted us in a weird way. So definitely a weird situation for us, but like it definitely, you're exactly right.
You automatically, I can think about some of the, myths associated with how we respond to grief because, well, it's not my family. So then I can't grieve this the way that I'm wanting to grieve it because I have to be strong for her actual family. And that's one of my big pet peeves with grief is minimizing and comparing. And, my grief is more important than your grief, or your grief is more important than mine because yours is heavier. Losing your grandma is, expected because she's old, but I lost my child and they didn't get to live a life. No, both of those griefs are griefs flat out for either person. Yeah. But our society just stinks at this like a lot. And that's like my passion project. That's what my book is about. That's what my approach with businesses is about, is like, we just have all the wrong ideas about how we're supposed to respond to grief. And if I can just change people's perspective, one person at a time, like that's my goal. So that's why I was really excited that you guys invited me to be here.
So tell us about your book. What inspired you to write it? And what did you want the main things to come from people who read it?
The work that I do, working with families who experience the loss of a child or the imminent loss of a child, they know it's coming. And which, by the way, is also grief. The life that you, like when you've got a medically fragile child, the life that you wanted for yourself, for your child, the medical trauma, the anticipatory grief. Anyway, okay, that's a side note. But watching in those circumstances how other people responded to their grief, outrageous things. Like you're at a family's funeral for their child, their infant, and the questions you ask are you going to have more kids? At the funeral.
Right.
Or, I'm trying to work with businesses about grief response because the experiences that I've seen our families go through. I specifically can think of one family that shares their story willingly for me to share with others. They lost a baby at 37 weeks, pregnancy. He was stillborn. And we did their pictures, and she shares that she wasn't working, but her husband was working in a manufacturing facility. And he came in to HR to ask for his bereavement leave. And they said, well, the policy says when you lose a living relative and your child never lived, so you don't get bereavement.
Wow.
So those are the kind of things that the families I'm serving encounter on a regular basis. And I just got fed up, honestly. And so it took me about 5 years to write, but I wrote Unshattered Grief, helping others through loss without breaking them again. Conceptually being that when someone's grieving, they've already been broken. And we say and do things to try to fix it. The platitudes that we share, the comparison that we have. I remember another gal told me that she lost her baby around 4th of July. And she got released from the hospital and she didn't want to go home and see the nursery. And so she and her husband went to a 4th of July party that family was having, tons of people. And she sits down and has a conversation with a woman that says, oh yeah, I get it. I don't have custody of my kids and I only get to talk to them once a week. And she was like, my child died. I never will get to talk to my child. So just like this attempt to understand and give you some solace in your grief, because I kind of sort of get it. It just, all of these things are not the correct response. In fact, my position is that the correct response to someone grieving is to simply say, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you. Yeah. And to just be present and be actively present, not ask, what do you need?
Right.
Because they don't know. Most of the people in those extreme grief circumstances, especially, can't even remember if they've showered, let alone Like, what do I need from you? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I always tell people, send them toilet paper and paper towels and paper plates and silverware, so they don't have to do dishes and they don't have to go to the grocery store to get toilet paper because they don't want to leave the house. Yeah. They don't even remember if they've eaten, but gosh, who wants to do dishes when they're, grieving such a heavy loss? So it's more about being present. And I'm just so motivated to help the world understand that there are myths associated with how we cope with grief, and there are myths associated with how we respond to someone grieving that we have to throw out the door. I firmly believe that if you think about westward expansion, okay, a little bit of history. I am not a history buff. My husband is. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you dates. It drives him crazy. But westward expansion, it was so like your life was at risk. Half your family would die on the way to promised land, essentially. And so westward expansion, we're just like in this survival mode because you don't have time to grieve that your daughter just died. You have to keep moving or you're going to die too. And I think that was carried literally generationally to where we're all living in survival mode, but we have every luxury at our disposal and we don't have to be.
Yeah.
Like we can actually take the time to grieve our losses, but we don't, because that's this generational thing that has been passed down to us from a time when people literally their life was in danger all the time. So anyway, I get lectury a little bit. Sorry.
A bit of it. No. And there's so much to unpack with all of the things that you covered. But one of the things that really kind of came to my understanding after we had the hospice for a while is that I realized that hospice was kind of the family's way of pre-grieving. Mm-hmm. The grief process, it was like a point where like, okay, now I'm supposed to grieve. We're supposed to deal with this head on and face it. And that I think a lot of people don't, unfortunately, in our society, because we put people on hospice so late. It's supposed to be a 6-month program, but most don't come on before, sometimes days or hours before they pass. And so the benefit of being on hospice from a psychological standpoint, in my mind, and you can help correct me if I'm wrong here, but was that people get to start the process early and get closure and start the process of going through it. So I think the beautiful thing about hospice is that it gives people a chance to stop and not be on that road and be forced to push through it. Because I think sometimes when they come onto our hospice and it's days before they're going to pass away, and even though, we've got great bereavement, we've got great chaplains and social workers and all the services, and we come to bear very quickly. Right. There's some time that has to occur for people to mentally absorb what's going to happen. And I think sometimes with the grief, it seems like hospice sometimes help mitigate some of that.
Absolutely. My experience is a little different only because what I work in is the pediatric side, and pediatric hospice is different. Pediatric hospice is about comfort care and palliative care. And so it could be weeks, it could be 2 years. Because it's just different in the pediatric world. They're not coming right at the end. Right. So that does extend that time, but I think also it delays the grief a little bit.
Oh, it does.
Because it's just the norm. It's just the day to day. They're just caring for this child 24/7 regardless. Yeah. So that is I think there's a little different experience there, but I totally understand where you're coming from. And, I've seen hospice with my own grandmother and those kind of things. And it does lend to that unless you have someone who has no idea how to handle grief.
Right.
And they just see it as a systematic processing of the end rather than, I should be reflecting right now. So I'm certified in the grief recovery method. as is my team members. And their definition of grief is the unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations, and the undelivered communication, and the things that we wish we would have done differently, better, or more. So grief is like the grief that floors us is that space where we didn't say the things we needed to say. We didn't do the things we needed to do. And I had all of these dreams and expectations for this relationship, and they're not happening. Yeah. So hospice would be the ideal space to say all of those things.
Yeah.
To do the things you wanted to do together before the time is gone. But I think the reality is that people don't always take that opportunity.
Yeah.
They may say a couple of the things, but I can openly share this story because she's given me permission to, if I may. One of my best friends and the vice president of my organization, her name is also Michelle. Everybody calls us Michelle Squared, affectionately. She's been with me from the beginning, so 13 years. She came to the organization because she lost her daughter. It would have been 30 years ago last year. And she got certified in the grief recovery method with me. And during the certification process, it's an 8-week program, but we do it in a day and a half when we're getting certified. And she thought she was going to come in and do the relationship with her daughter, like work on losing her daughter. And she realized that even though she was in a happy marriage, that she and her husband never addressed the loss of their daughter together. And then she had built up a lot of resentment because of that. They didn't go to the gravesite, but twice since she had passed, like they didn't do any of this together. They didn't mourn together, which was very lonely for the both of them. So without him knowing, she worked on processing those unmet things with her husband. Never told him, because that's kind of the process. People get defensive if you come at them and say, hey, these things are left unsaid. So she never told him. She went home and their whole relationship changed. It was already good, but it got leagues better. They started traveling together, things that they weren't doing because there was distance that she was unknowingly creating. They started traveling together, doing all these things. 2 years later, he dies of COVID. And anybody that looks at her, I can't believe the way that you're processing his loss. Like, this is amazing. You're so, so strong. It's because nothing was left unsaid. She had no regrets. She processed all of the pain. And so when he passed, everything was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so yes, of course she grieves. It's been 4 years. She's still, on the anniversary of his loss, she takes a few days to process. She's going to do that for the rest of her life because grief never leaves you. And I want to make sure that I'm very adamant about that. But we can also work through it and cope with it to where it no longer causes us pain. And that's what she did before he even passed. So there is such beauty in processing those unmet hopes and dreams and expectations, saying the things that we need to say, whether it's to that person or it's just to somebody that hears us and validates those things for us.
Well, for somebody out there who may be grieving now, it might be difficult for them to understand what normal grief feels like and what maybe grief where they need to seek professional help looks like. Can you help us understand that a little bit? So
I'm not, I think a few years ago they came out with a diagnosis. If your grief lasts more than 6 months, then I don't remember what it's called, grief syndrome or something. I do not believe in that. I have no professional, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. In what I've seen, I think grief, again, always stays with us. It's where it is hindering your ability to do everyday life for an extended period of time. Then I think maybe you need some help to process what you're going through.
Yeah.
It is not something's wrong with you. It's just you don't have the tools yet to process it. And it is keeping you from finding capacity for joy again. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is grief can stay with us. That loss can stay with us, but we need to be able to find joy again. There's this really cool, it's been a while since I've seen it, but there's this really cool visual of a box with a ball in it. And there's a button at the bottom. And initially, the ball is really, really big. And so it hits that button all the time. The button's the grief button. So it's hitting it all the time, bouncing around this box. And then the next image is the box bigger and the ball smaller. And so it's hitting the button less often. Every time it hits the button, the pain's still the same. And everybody assumes the box got bigger or the ball got smaller, but it's actually that the box gets bigger because we start to build life around that grief. It's still a part of us.
Yeah.
I also like the visual. Grew up on a farm. I'm a rural girl. My kids make fun of my country accent coming out every once in a while. I cannot say "ol." I can only say "ol." And one of the things that I think about is when you grow up on a farm and you put in a barbed wire fence, often there's like little sapling trees next to it that you don't pay any attention to. And 5 years down the road, this full-grown tree has grown up next to the fence, but the fence has grown into it. There's barbed wire grown into the tree. There's these nasty knots on it. It looks gross. But if you go in and try and cut that barbed wire out, it'll kill the tree. And I think that's what grief is. Like, this tree is big and tall and beautiful, except for a couple of nasty little knots on it. But they're part of who that tree is. They're part of its structure. And if you try to remove that completely, which I think a lot of people just try to ignore their grief and remove it, if you try to remove that completely, you won't survive. Yeah. So it's about growing with that being part of you.
So what are if everything that's good has a bad piece and everything that's bad has a good piece, what are the good things of going through a well-processed grief process? Because that's a funny way of saying it. But in my mind, there must be some benefit to if you're got to go through grief anyway.
Yeah,
like it's going to happen to all of us. Yeah. There must be some psychological benefits to going through it the right way.
I think all the uncomfortable things cause us to grow, regardless. So there's a space for growth there. There's a space for seeing the world differently, often more positively. I mean, anybody who's suffered loss finds appreciation in little things that maybe they didn't appreciate before. Going on a walk and appreciating the birds chirping in the trees, all the way down to there not being dust bunnies under the coffee table being something that they find value in. Yeah. There's just a space for, and when you process your grief in a positive way, and when you do it with the right coping mechanisms and you're not trying to pretend it's not there, then you start that joy that you do find, that capacity for joy is that much more powerful.
Yeah.
Because grief is something we love not being there anymore.
Yeah.
So then we start to love the things that are there a little more strongly.
Yeah.
Because we value and we know how important those things are.
Yeah.
Things we may have taken advantage of or not even recognized to be valuable in our lives.
Yeah.
Suddenly they are.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think when my parents passed away, there was a process that I went through and when I came out of that process, and I definitely hit all the stages. I think I stuck in anger a little bit longer than I probably should have, but I did appreciate my relationships a lot more. They just seemed just so much more important to me. Mm-hmm. Did you guys feel that at all in your experience?
They are nodding their heads for those that are listening.
Who can't see us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess for you, what do you think is like the biggest struggle parents have, especially after they lose a child and they have other kids or they're expecting another child?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think are like the things that you see most common with those kind of families?
Yeah. So having a baby after a loss, we call them rainbow babies because it's a rainbow in the midst of the storm. And I want to put out there too, that tends to be the expectation after a loss, that families will have more children or, and a lot of times they can't, or they choose not to. So that's perfectly normal. But we as an organization, part of our ongoing support is to do free photos for those families that we did loss photos for when they have another child. Because one, carrying a child after you've had a loss is immensely psychologically difficult because you are simultaneously celebrating and grieving even more immensely because all of the things you were supposed to experience with your child now include this other child that you're going to have that won't get to experience those things. And there's immense fear, especially if you've had a birth loss or an infant loss, that you're not going to make it all the way to term, or they're going to be born early and not make it in the NICU. Like there's just all these fears. So when we do photos, we give them the opportunity to include more memorabilia for the child they lost, which can be hard to do if you just hired a photographer and you're like, I want maternity pictures. Oh, also here's a picture of my deceased baby. Like a lot of people won't understand that. So doing that in the safety of photographers who understand and do this work anyway, gives them a lot of comfort because they can just rest in that space. And then we just, as an organization, we continue to provide ongoing services for them. So yeah, there's definitely, I remember one of the recipients that I've gotten really close to, her rainbow baby, they had a stillborn. Then their daughter had a heart condition and never left the hospital, and she lived for 57 days. Jeez. Then they had a miscarriage, and then they finally had their rainbow, and he just turned 2. Oh, wow. And I was in all of that process. When there's that many hits, we tend to get really close to those families because they're they have to constantly interact with us. And so she and I have gotten really, really close. And I'm going to get emotional. His first Halloween, they went trick-or-treating with us. Because that was something he was like 8 months old, y'all. He did not understand trick-or-treating, but they had never got to do that with their other children. And so I was like, oh, we have to go to Roundtree. You should come with us. We know all of the good spots. And so, here I am just carrying this little dude around. And then I'm at his first birthday party and then they've actually been able to have another child. And I've got to be involved with that. So like, it's not just about the pictures, it's about the relationship and having the support of somebody who gets it. And anybody else might look at them and be like, why are you taking this 8-month-old trick-or-treating? But I was like, girl, let's go. Like I am in it. I want to be there. I want to be present. So really just meeting them where they are. I think, again, that comes back to anything with responding to someone as grieving is just being present. And giving them the space to experience what they need to experience without any expectations. I think we put a lot of expectations on grievers. We had another mom that I think about, her daughter lived for 4 days in the NICU and then passed. And she shared with me, like, she was literally counting every single day after she had passed. And she said, on day 87, I still couldn't get out of bed. And my sister said, can you watch my kids? And I was like, no. And she's like, when are you going to get out of bed? You should be done with this by now. And I was like, day 87, that's not anything after you've lost your child. But we put a timeline on grief. We put expectations on people. So just meeting them where they are and not putting any expectations is really.
Well, you bring up a good point because I'm thinking about, there are people that they lose someone and they start pushing people away. They kind of isolate themselves. And what does positive support look like in those situations?
Right. When they're being reclusive. I've got a little girl that I did. So I still do pictures for part of the organization. So doing it for 13 years. I've got kiddos I've been working with for a long time. And last January, we lost a recipient that I had been the photographer for 9 years. And super close to the family. And since losing her, because it was their only child, because she needed constant medical care, and they didn't think it would be fair to bring another child into that situation. So for 11 years, her mom was her 24/7 caregiver, and then she passes. And so mom and I were super, super close. And now that she's gone, I barely talk to her because she's kind of pulled away because she doesn't know what to do with herself anymore. She doesn't know what life looks like without her daughter, even her friendships.
Yeah.
And so in that space, I just send her a text every few weeks and just say, I'm thinking about you. And every once in a while I get a response. Sometimes I just get a little heart emoji response, but sometimes it's, thank you so much for, and I tell her every once in a while, I'm here.
Yeah.
Would love to get coffee, would love to spend time with you, but I don't push.
Yeah.
So I think that's the really important part is that we're not saying, what do you need? I'm not putting that on her. I'm just letting her know that whenever you're ready, doors wide open.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, the reason why I keep kind of harping on this is because there's a line where you take an older person, when they lose someone, cortisol goes through the roof, their immune system goes down, and they're going through the stages, and, you've got family kind of standing on the sidelines, and they don't know where the line is to help, because oftentimes, when an older adult loses a spouse, the second spouse doesn't last a long time sometimes.
Correct. Yeah.
But there is life after loss. And, for me, it's like, where is the line between helping and passively standing by?
Yeah.
And allowing someone to go down a road that maybe they can't help themselves.
Right.
And they need help.
It's hard to determine where that line is. I think it has a lot to do with the relationship that you have with that person, like pre-established. So I think, an older couple, their daughter has more of a connection, but also, was it a good relationship before? So is this, because maybe they're getting concerned, well, my daughter's only engaging because they're wanting to restore before something happens to me. So it really is, there's so many factors that play into that. I think if it were a circumstance where I had a good relationship with that person, say it was my sister and she lost her husband. I know because of our pre-established relationship that I could just show up at her door. And then she would have I guess she could not open the door, but I would be there.
Yeah.
And the message would be clear at that point. I'm worried about you. We need to fix this. We need to address this.
And when you say that, what do you mean when you say we need to fix this? We need to address this?
Okay. I shouldn't have said fix, honestly, because you can't fix it. You can't make the pain go away. But we need to get you out of a space where your own life is at risk, whether that's mentally or even physically, because like you said, older couples, their immune system shuts down, their cortisol goes up. If they're not getting out of bed, that's detrimental to their own health. So we need to get to a space where you can get out of bed, where you can have some semblance of life, and maybe we're working towards joy as well.
Yeah.
We need to fix this stage that you're in. We need to prop you back up to a space where you can start seeing the beauty in the world. Not trying to take away their grief, not trying to put expectations on how they grieve or when they grieve, but just making sure that their own mental health is not falling by the wayside. And I think we can get there really easily, depending on how deep that loss is.
Sure.
And you're right. I've seen, I see it with the parents. I've seen it with my own grandparents. When my grandmother passed, my grandfather lived for 2 more years, but his dementia went full throttle after she passed. Because there was nothing else to hold him there mentally.
Yeah.
And so his he went off really, really quickly after she passed, because she literally was the glue that held our family together.
Yeah.
And so, and he had support, but it wasn't, in my sense of the word, he wasn't receptive, never really had been receptive to that mental support, that emotional support. he's from a different generation, right?
Sure.
It's really hard with an
It
older
is,
generation
absolutely.
to get them to engage in that mental and emotional support that we want to provide.
Well, and so often, I mean, this is at any age, but it especially impacts older adults is when they're grieving, they stop taking care of themselves. And that impact is, 10 times as damaging to people when they, don't take their meds, they don't eat, they,
Right.
They isolate. And we talk about isolation in this podcast all the time about how detrimental it is. It's like smoking a pack a day because people, it just is super damaging for them not to have that connection. And so that's why I'm kind of, again, going back to, people my age with parents that are getting to that stage where one or the other parent is going to pass away at some point. And we want to try to help give them tools to use to say, when this happens, and it will happen, here's what you could do. Here's where you jump in. These are the things that you should look out for. Because as much as people might think, well, the spouse passed away soon after, and that's like what God intended and that sort of thing. There is part of me that's like, yeah, but what if there is life after? As my grandmother on my dad's side passed when she was 80, and her husband had died decades before, and she had a full life.
Yeah.
And so, she grieved her entire life.
Absolutely.
Like that never changed. But I did feel like family was extremely important to her, and that probably, not that it wouldn't have been anyway, but you could tell that it was important. It enhanced that feeling. But we want to make sure that we've got the right balance between giving someone space and making sure they're okay.
Yeah. My grandfather passed when my mom was 17, so I never met him. My grandmother never remarried, and lived alone until she was in her 80s and she passed. But man, she had so much joy and love and zest for life. And, again, a different generation. I think that was just a lot her personality. Like, I'm not going to let this, but also he was my soulmate, and I'm not going to get married again, but she still found joy in her grandchildren. She had me and my sister, and we spent a lot of time with her when we were growing up. And, she had a lot of zest for life, and it was really beautiful to watch. So I think a lot of personality has to do with that too.
Yeah. Who
who they are as a person. And you can prepare people as much as you want to try. But again, it's just, there's no definitive answer, I don't think, in how do we make sure they're okay, because it's all in what they're receptive to.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of why I feel like I'm on this mission, like one person at a time, to make people aware of the impact that grief can have and the way that we project our grief, right? We all kind of think of that as crying, being emotional, being depressed, but there are other ways that we don't think about that people project their grief. Exercising 4 hours a day. People start, obvious things like drinking and things like that, but maybe they're binge watching TV every night, or like things that are easily hidden that aren't necessarily bad. Like exercising 4 hours a day isn't necessarily bad unless it's intentionally to keep your grief at bay. Because we start doing these things to keep our grief at bay, and good things can become bad things if it means we're trying to pretend like we're not broken.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy way of coping. A healthy way of coping is sitting down with someone that you trust and being vulnerable and saying, I'm heartbroken and this is hard for me. And we tend to just push all of those emotions down and not give them a voice. And when we can find somebody that we can trust, that we can give those things a voice to, it makes a huge difference. But so many of us are just pretending like we're not feeling those things and we're not saying them out loud. And that's, I think, the first step is saying, this has broken me.
Yeah.
And I need somebody to just hear me.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. Do you think that we're worse at grieving now than in previous generations?
I think overall that my generation, there's this epidemic of mental health crises, right? And I use quotation marks for listeners because I don't believe it's an epidemic. I believe that my generation is tired of pretending like we're all okay.
Yeah.
Because that's how I was raised. You're doing something emotional right now and I can't handle this. So please go deal with that by yourself. I remember going to college and realizing, I have absolutely no coping mechanisms at all. And I'm 3 hours from home and I don't know how to deal with life. So I think we just started going, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to pretend like everything's okay when inside I am really, really struggling.
Yeah.
And so I started going to a counselor in college. My children, who are 18 and 15, have both seen counselors since they were 8 on a monthly basis because I've normalized that for them. So now my oldest just turned 18 and we're talking about adulthood and all of these things. And it is just a normal part of his life that when he leaves home, he's planning to make sure he has a good counselor on his own. That's his words, not mine. So we're getting into this space where we're normalizing addressing mental health issues when they hit.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're seeing this quote epidemic is because we're just addressing it. We're making it apparent.
It's more vocal, more visual.
So, but other generations, I still see in my family, even people in my generation who are like, I'm totally fine. I'm like, no, you're not. Grief expert over here. I'm pretty sure no. But I'm also not telling them that. I'm not in their face going, hey, you need to deal with your stuff. Because they're not receptive. So it's a slow process. I do think it's getting better. But I think it's slowly changing. And I think my kids' generation is going to be a little bit more in tune to that. And it really just depends on where you come from, right? The reality is when you look at data with impoverished communities, there's more mental health crises because they can't afford to go get counseling. They can't afford to go get help professionally. And then that trickles down to their own children. And so it just kind of depends on what circumstances you're in too, on whether or not that's changing.
Yeah. I often wonder, because you mentioned a lot with, your generation, how in an age of social media, how things will change as it relates to grief. What are your thoughts around social media and people sharing more about grief on, and do you feel like there's good and bad information?
Oh, there's absolutely good and bad information in that sense. I am, I wouldn't say an entirely open book, but I do like to share vulnerably on social media, with my friend group. I don't do public posts or whatever, but like my oldest actually went through a mental health crisis last year. And I didn't share every detail, but with his permission, shared a little bit because there were things we missed because we didn't necessarily have the right counselor for him. And we didn't know that till he was 16, and things that were getting brushed off as typical adolescent behavior were actually not.
Yeah.
And so I want to share that. When my youngest was diagnosed with autism at 8.5, so he's high functioning autistic, high IQ. So we missed it initially. And when I shared about it and shared the things that I'm now seeing, those were the signs that I should have been looking at. Within 2 weeks, I had a friend come to me and say, thanks to your posts, we got my 3-year-old evaluated and he has autism. So that's why I share, because if I can help one person see that something might be going on in their world that they hadn't thought about that way. But I also think that we get the other side of that. I say, not going to get political, but we're so divided right now because everybody's in their bubble and I only see my perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think that qualifies when we're dealing with someone who is grieving too. When they're unreceptive to help, it's because they're staying in their bubble. They're staying in that box. They're being very rigid about what they think grief looks like and what they believe is the right process.
Sure.
But it's ultimately causing distress for them. And so how do we break through that box and help them to see that there's another way?
Sure.
Just depends on each person, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish I could just say, this is the way that you do it.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen both sides. I've seen the stoic that never talks about it.
Absolutely.
Doesn't ever seem like they're dealing with it at all. And then the other person who never stops talking about it, and everything they do is related to that person passing away.
Right.
And so both seem dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And, finding that balance, I'm Generation X. And so I was raised a little bit differently in that it was very hands off and make your own way. And, as a parent, I really relate to some of the things I've seen about Gen X in that we want to be more for our kids than what we received. But at the same time, we do want to set them up for success in a world that is going to let them fail.
Yeah.
And so letting them make some mistakes and, some of those bumps and bruises are educational.
Yeah.
And so finding that right balance. And so as somebody who wants to be there and support my kids, if they have to go through a grieving process, or, an older adult that, I think sometimes as a society, we do think that, well, they were old, they were going to die. It's, not as bad, grandma's old. And I don't think people understand that just because you're in an 80-year-old person's skin doesn't change the fact that pain is beyond what some people can even imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I want to make it relevant, but at the same time, finding that balance between being supportive and how to support someone when they're going through something like that. Because there's this part of me is like, well, give them space. And then there's this other part of me that's like, don't give them space,
Yeah, absolutely.
get in their face, or whatever.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And you talk about, your kids and like wanting to give them more, but then also I think we're seeing more entitlement too with the younger generations, because the parents whose feelings and emotions were squashed are like, anything you want, like, and so there's like finding that balance. Like with my own kids, we are always very open and vulnerable, but also kindness and respect rule the day in my house. So if you can't be kind and respectful with what you have to say, then we're going to have to reframe this and figure out another way. But also we are open. We are open and honest about like my kids tell me everything, and I'm so lucky. And we give them a little bit of freedom. Yeah. My oldest last year was like driving to Buffalo to go see a friend of his. And my husband and I are like, oh, I guess he needs a curfew. My bad. We never did that. 1 o'clock, I guess, buddy. And he's like, ew, I'm going to be home by 10. And so now they're 18 and 15. And now I'm like, can you guys just get a little rebellious while you're at home safe? Like, where is this? But because we've given them autonomy, that rebellion's not there.
Yeah.
But also they're not jerks. Thank God, So I think we can put that in the same context with grief. Like, we want to give people the autonomy to feel what they need to feel.
Sure.
But also, like, maybe this is hurting you more than it needs to.
Right.
And let's sit down and talk about it.
Sure.
Not I'm coming at you with judgment and saying this is wrong, but I'm concerned, and can we just have a conversation? Tell me what's going on in your head right now. Yeah. And maybe that one time that somebody sits down and says that, they finally say it out loud and they go, oh, and they get some recognition, to what is going on in their mind and what's going on in their head and how they're maybe not handling this the best way. And, oh, I might need a little bit of help with this. Yeah.
I mean, I love that you gave good guidance on what not to say at a funeral. And, maybe the best approach. But then after the funeral, like the days or weeks or months after the funeral, that when the dust settles, so to speak, and everyone's like, you should move on, it's time to, dust yourself off and let's go. But, there is a degree of that, right? Like there has to be a degree of being supportive in a way that is, okay, it is time to get out of bed. It is time. Let's get dressed and let's go do something. Let's get out of this house. And for me, I really want to know where that line is, because, saying you want to be there for someone and actually being there for someone in the right way is really important for me to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to hone in on saying you'll be there for someone and then actually showing up.
Yeah.
I think we get into those platitudes. Even the concept of, I'm sorry for your loss. I mean, raise of hands, how many times we've said that to somebody. Mm-hmm. But when I talk to the families that I've worked with, that actually means to them, oh, I don't really want to talk about this. So I'm acknowledging that you're grieving, and then let's move on to something else. So even I'm sorry, I don't say that anymore. I usually say something like, my heart is with you, if I'm not close to that person. So when we're talking about that line, I think it's really important that we get behind our own words. So if we say one of your friends loses their parent and you send them a text that says, I'm here for you. Let me know what you need. We've talked about that. They are not going to be able to do that reaching out. Mm-hmm. Another approach, depending on how close you are, might be, hey, I'm headed to Walmart. Is there anything I can get for you? That is an active moment right then. Mm-hmm. It's not at some time down the road, if you tell me that you need me, I might actually be there. It is in this very moment, I am here for you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do something. Or depending on the relationship, showing up and saying, here's a cup of coffee. I'm going to fold your laundry today.
Yeah.
It is not necessarily always saying, let's get out of bed today. It may just be, I'm showing up for you.
Yeah.
And because I'm doing that, I have to pull you out of isolation. I have to pull you out of this loneliness. And so even if you don't get out of bed, I will come with my coffee and sit in bed with you and just be present.
Yeah.
And if you do that often enough, they'll get up and answer the door the next time.
Yeah.
They'll go, well, why don't we go to a coffee shop? I'm tired of this coffee you keep bringing me. Can we go over here instead? Like the eventuality is because you've showed up and you've been consistent and you are reliable and dependable, and they know that you are a safe place. Then they'll start sharing more. Then they'll start feeling safer. Then they'll start seeing those little joyful things. It is when we have somebody in our life that is isolating in their grief and we don't actually do anything about it other than send them a quick text that says, like, it's understanding those boundaries, right? Like, thinking of you only goes so far. I can send about 6 of those before I'm like, now I'm going to show up because you aren't responding. And that concerns me. Which I'm going to take my own advice. And as soon as I leave here, that friend I've been texting is getting a stop by.
Drive by.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice for sure.
If someone right now is in the middle of grief, feeling disoriented, numb, or overwhelmed, what would you want them to hear today?
Your grief is valid. Whatever the thing that's causing that grief. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not something worth grieving, even if it's not somebody that's passed. Several years ago, we tried to sell our house and we found the best house. And then the buyers, their bank kept delaying things. And my entire house was packed, 2,200 square feet, all packed, moving in 3 days. The sale falls through after 3 months of delays. I was devastated. And my friend, who just a couple years prior lost twins, calls me to check on me. And I'm like, why are you calling me? And she said, loss is loss, my friend. Like, you're struggling right now and I've got you. So whatever it is that you're grieving, it's valid. Just make sure that you're not hiding from your grief. Give it a name, give it a voice, say out loud to someone you trust the things that you are feeling, the regrets that you have, the dreams that you wish would happen that can't anymore. Say those things out loud, because it's the pushing those things down, pretending they're not there, not saying them out loud, that causes our grief to take away our joy. So when we give it a voice, when we say it out loud, when we give it space, that leaves room for joy to step into.
It's good.
That's really good.
Yeah, really good.
I told y'all when I got here I wasn't nervous, but I am sweating now. So like, these are hard questions.
When you have a spouse that has a loved one pass away, any advice for the best way for them to support their spouse?
So again, we come back to the fact that most of my experience is with families losing a child. And the unfortunate reality is a lot of those families don't make it. The couples break up. And that is often because, I would say most prevalently, that's because they do not talk to each other about their grief. So even if the person that your spouse has lost, I mean, my mother-in-law is one of my closest friends. So if my husband's mom died, I would also be devastated. But it's his mama, right?
Right.
So we don't want to dismiss our own grief, first of all. So in that space, when you and your spouse are grieving and it's somebody that's really intimately close to your spouse, if you're opening up a little bit, then ask them. Don't make it just about, this is how I'm feeling, and then just leave it. Just walk away from the conversation. I'm feeling this. What are you feeling? Because if you open up that vulnerability, and then that helps them to feel safe to be vulnerable as well. And just give them the space to talk about it. And, take a little weight off their shoulders. So if my husband were to have lost his mom, which is, it's inevitable. They're in their 70s. I don't like to think about it. Making sure that, he has gobs of PTO, and making sure he's taking that and utilizing that, and not 2 weeks later going back to work because he needs something to do. That's where we're hiding behind something for, like, you're not actually processing. One of the things I advocate for when I'm talking to businesses is that 3 to 5 days off is not enough. Because especially if it's someone close where you're planning their funeral, a funeral on average takes about 5 to 7 days to plan. So that whole time you're in planning mode, and that actual grief doesn't start until after the funeral has happened. And then a lot of times we have to go back to work.
Right.
So to the best of your ability, creating that cushion of space so that your spouse can take the time that they deserve, even if it's just a week longer after the funeral, to actually set in their grief, understand what they're feeling, give it a voice, and validate that for them.
Yeah.
I think is probably the best approach.
And, with the stages of grief, I'm assuming there's some landmines in there as a spouse you want to look out for. What are the things
I, first of all, do not believe in the stages of grief.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's
the originality of that concept was originally developed for someone who got a terminal diagnosis for themselves.
Okay.
And going through those stages in their own diagnosis.
Okay.
And then psychological society, what have you, doctors, everything picked that up. And now it became like the societal norm for all grief.
Okay.
But if you think about it, if my husband were to die, I would not ever be in denial about that fact, right? Mm-hmm. If I got cancer, I might be in denial that I actually have cancer and somebody's wrong and I need 5 other opinions. Sure. But if my husband's gone, I'm not going to be in denial of the fact that he's gone. And it's not cyclical, like it's not a system. It's not cyclical. It is a jumbled mess. So we're going to feel all of those concepts, anger and sadness, and all of those concepts of the myths of grief are reality, but they're not systematic. They're all over the place.
I hear what you're saying. I totally agree with that piece of it. I feel like people waver in and out of different emotions related to grief. But I think where I was going with this was, as a spouse, and you're giving somebody space
Yeah.
or whatever it is, I'm sure it's hard for some people not to take things personal when, like I said, a lot of guys, grief is anger, sadness is anger,
Work.
just in distraction of
Yeah,
any kind,
100%.
that sort of thing. I don't want to have to deal with it again,
Yeah.
or I'm not supposed to deal with it again.
Right. Because
I've
that's
already cried.
I mean, it's a gal in a room full of guys. And I'm sure you all can attest to the fact that guys are supposed to be the strong ones, right?
Yeah.
We've got to hold this family together. What I see that happens in those circumstances with child loss is that dad feels like his position holding the family together is bringing home money so that we can continue to pay the bills, and I'm going to work overtime and I'm going to do all of this stuff. And mom's position is managing everyone's emotions. So both are equally cumbersome. So when you are in a situation, again, we'll go back to your husband's lost his mother and he's taking overtime. He's never home. He's going to play golf 5 times a week after work. When you see extreme changes in his daily routine, that's an early warning sign that he's not dealing with something. For the woman, when you see that she just cleaned the whole house yesterday and she's doing it all again, or she's decided to start a business a month after her mom dies. Like, those are signs that she's trying to not acknowledge the pain that she's feeling. Or she's shut down. A lot of women are very engaged with their family and you're not seeing that engagement, or you're seeing a lot of overstimulation, or jumping and responding viscerally to things that normally wouldn't bug her. Those are things to watch for when Side note, I just got diagnosed with ADHD like a year and a half ago, which is another thing that's happening. Like, women my age are starting to get diagnosed. And I'm looking back on my past and realizing, oh, those were moments I was overstimulated. But I didn't know that that's what was going on. So now I can name it and be like, I am overstimulated right now. Especially, my kids are homeschooled. And so my oldest is a metalhead and he likes to sing, if we can... God love him. It's more like yelling. And I'm like, and I need you to stop. I'm very overstimulated right now. But before I would just be like, stop it. And, not realizing that was overstimulation, right? Yeah. So a lot of us, our emotional overstimulation looks like these visceral responses to ridiculous things.
Yeah.
And so just watching for those little triggers that this behavior is not normal for you. And I think this is your grief. And then it's, how do I address it? And sometimes it's just, can I sit down with you because I'm feeling rough and I want to share. And you make it like I'm the one that's going to be vulnerable first. And then I'm opening up that opportunity for you to be vulnerable. Because if we come at somebody and go, I don't think you're doing this right. I think you're struggling.
Yeah.
We need to address. Yeah, they're not
Start
gonna
with an accusation.
No,
it always starts like, it always gets a conversation going well, doesn't it?
Go back to those I statements that we all know are important in communication. And then they feel safe.
Yeah. Safety is the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I think, I think people definitely deal with grief differently. Mm-hmm. I think you've pointed out so many great things about grief. Let me turn it back to your book. Who needs to read your book?
Everybody.
Everybody.
It is literally geared at people who have grieving friends, family in their life. Well, then we're all grieving. So you're going to experience it eventually. If you don't have someone close to you that is grieving now, you will. And the book utilizes a lot of stories, not just from families that I've served. I've got people that have lost spouses, siblings, been through immense trauma, my own story, which I hesitated to share, but obviously I can't tell you how to do things if I don't tell you how I did it. Mm. But mostly it's just about what I've encountered. And these people being very vulnerable with me about what helped and what did not help.
Yeah.
And the reality of these platitudes. We also go into the fact that we often say to people, I mean, we live in the Bible Belt, and so God tends to be a lot of what people respond with. And it's, well, God has a plan, or God needed another little angel, or it was just that time. Well, I'm sorry. When you have a family holding their deceased child and you say to them, God has a plan, they don't, even if they love God, they don't want nothing to do with that plan. That's not the response. We tend to, as a society, bring logic to an emotional place.
Sure.
And that's like polar opposites of magnets trying to bring those together. You have to meet emotion with emotion.
Yeah. Well, I do think the intention is good.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
they're trying to bring comfort to someone in the only way they know how.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're talking about it today, is that we want to try to figure out maybe, I don't know, just knowing what the hot buttons are not to push.
There's another way.
Yeah. Because I've experienced all those in my own life. And, you're supposed to feel comfortable now. Like now that I've said that,
Yeah.
like you should feel better now. So
Well, we
it's
have
all
a
good.
desire. We have an innate desire to fix things.
Yeah, we do.
Like we just want to fix it. And if I say this one thing, maybe it'll take a little bit of the burden off. That is not even reality.
No.
It's impossible for us to fix.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I tell my photographers that go into these situations, we do trauma-informed training for them. And you can't say anything that's going to make this moment better for them. But your presence, you giving of your time and your talent in that moment says more than any words can, because you're meeting them right where they are.
Yeah.
And you're giving them the safety to go ahead and grieve in that space too. So, I mean, that's what it comes down to for anybody, is just meeting them where they are.
Yeah. People, because I'm going on 55, and I think grieving what you used to be able to do that you can't do anymore, and the aging process itself, it is almost its own grief process. You have a lot of fears related to what's happening and what's coming around the corner next, and how much time you have left, and that sort of thing. All of those things spark discomfort and that sort of thing. But at the same time, it does make me very vigilant on the time I have left, and like, how do I really want to spend it? And what things can I slow down? Like what part of this aging process do I actually have control of?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we want to get into this podcast, into this more and more, because the grief process can have such a profound mental effect on people,
And physiological.
and it can change the direction of your life for sure. And I think, acknowledging, we talk a lot about hospice on this show, because it just doesn't get talked about a lot,
Nope.
unfortunately. And I think the more we try to get people to, lack of a better way of putting it, take your vitamins with podcast in podcast form. That's what this is. It's not always fun, and it can be entertaining, but at the same time, it's understanding that these are things that in society we shy away from, but the more we face it head on, the more joyous of a life we could live.
Absolutely.
And I think the work you do represents that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I get told a lot that I miss my calling as a counselor. And I'm like, no, I got my calling right on, because I get the opportunity to build relationships with these folks and take them trick-or-treating. And sometimes that boundary has to be crossed, and they need to see that there's love and relationship and safety there. But also I feel like changing the perspective on grief is 100% my calling.
Yeah.
I'm very, very passionate about it. And like I said, one person at a time. So whoever took their vitamins today, as you said, very good. Good job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Figure it out.
How can listeners find you?
So literally anything on our On Angels Wings website will come back to me. So it's oawphoto.org. On angelswingsphoto.org. And you can, I will, even if I'm not available, like I said, I've got other people that I can put you in touch with, and I just want to see the community find joy more as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all. So much great advice, so many good things. One thing I just want to pull back to the surface too is just how you said that grief is relative to everyone. Like no matter what the situation is, don't be ashamed of your grief.
Yeah.
You know, you just because someone else might have had it worse or lost somebody that they were supposedly closer with than you were with that person. Like grief is grief. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a divorce or, you know, loss of a job or, you know, life changing or bodies changing or whatever it is, you know, it's all relative, and being able to acknowledge it and face it and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. I think, you know, trying to be there for my kids, like oftentimes when they're struggling with something, I don't say a lot, but I do, you know, hold them close and say that I'm here. And that's like 99% of it for them. They don't want me to fix it. They don't need me to fix it. They just want to know that they got somebody to back them up.
Absolutely. Okay, I have to give you one more story. I'm always full of stories. I had a gal that went through the grief recovery program with me. And she shared with me that it's changing her response to her children. Her daughter, who's I think 8, got a balloon from some event. And that balloon popped and she was devastated. And her mom was like, previously I would have been like, this is just a balloon. Like, why are we doing this? But instead, I just held her and let her cry. And in 5 minutes, she was fine. But I acknowledged it and I let her feel it. And it changed everything about that interaction.
Absolutely.
So every little loss counts and matters.
Yeah.
And we just need to hold people close and let them feel what they need to feel. Because feelings are valid.
Absolutely.
Even if they are unfounded, they are valid.
Yeah.
So even if you can justify how someone treated you, the fact that it made you feel crappy is still valid.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the other little piece is that it doesn't abdicate you from responsibility.
No.
Like just because you're in grief and just because bad things happen to good people all the time, it doesn't mean that life doesn't go on. We still do have to get on the Oregon Trail or whatever your analogy was earlier and keep moving because we do need to keep moving. And it's not an excuse. We can acknowledge it. We can be there for people, but we can also say you're still responsible.
And I think people will find that they can move through when they acknowledge what they're feeling.
Yeah.
A lot easier.
Absolutely.
It's a lot harder to move through. It's like trying to swim through mud when you're pretending that you're not grieving.
Yeah.
But when you can acknowledge it, then that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, I do think there's psychological and physical damage that comes from running from these feelings.
Absolutely.
So as always, please like and subscribe and thumbs up and 5-star, everything you need to support this channel. Want to thank Michelle for being on, Michelle Cramer for being on the show today. Please get her book. What's the name of the title of the book?
Book is Unshattered Grief. It's on Amazon.
Awesome. And if you know someone who might be struggling with grief, please send this podcast to them. It might be good for them to hear a few of the things that we've covered today in the show. And keep listening. We're going to keep diving into caregivers taking care of themselves, ways in which to protect your family. Aging is tough enough as it is, and we want people to age better.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And we'd love to stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram at In Good Company Elder Care Podcast.
You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at IGC Pod, and on TikTok at IGC Elder Care Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to In Good Company. I'm John Ray, and I've been joined by my amazing co-host, Spencer Ernst. Special thanks to our executive producer, Alex Wallace, for helping bring this show to life. Until next time, take care and remember, you are always in good company.